What's good, everybody? It's Chris Crazy House, and I was definitely not expecting to be recording this video today, but I was in the middle of recording video and audio for my Newgrounds commentary, and I got the alert, I believe it was on Twitter, and it was that the legendary manga artist Akira Toriyama has passed away. And I made sure to do my due diligence because I don't automatically believe anything that comes from social media. I always like to check and see where these stories come from and who is reporting it. But come to find out, it is true. Akira Toriyama has passed away. Very sad news. Okay, he was an artist that was an influence on me, as I'm sure he was an influence on many creatives out there, whether you be just an artist who draws comics, someone who makes animation, or even if you're just someone who's into collecting toys or making maquettes or statues or whatever. He definitely had a big influence. He's one of those creators that even if you don't know his work, he had an influence on you because he probably influenced whoever influenced you. Like if you're too young or your fandom doesn't go back as far, he might have influenced someone that you look at as the top manga artist or the top manga creator to you. So that's how big his influence is. And you have to think about this: when you create a concept that not only is popular within your own city, it wasn't just popular in his own country, it was popular all over the world. The fact that the concept or the IP of Dragon Ball and Dragon Ball Z has been translated into several dozen languages speaks volumes to how amazing that creation is, okay, and how popular that creation is. There's very few creators who have reached that height. For most creators, they'll just be happy if they can be even a local success, right? They're just a success within their own area or within maybe one genre. But to expand that far, that's very rarefied air, to where you've reached that height as a creator where your concept is so well known around the globe. That means a lot, and that's a very big deal. And you can't, if nothing else, even if you're not a Dragon Ball fan, you can't deny the influence and the power behind what Akira Toriyama created. And once again, very sad news that he's passed away. I have to give my condolences to his family. I know he was very much a family-oriented man. From what I know, I only know a little bit about his personal life. It usually revolves more around his career as far as what I know. But I do know that he was very family-oriented. He was all about being with his family. And, he's mostly a recluse when it comes to doing interviews with the press and the outside world. He kind of stayed in and concentrated on creating his work and spending time with his family. And I understand that, because as an artist, it's all about the creation of the work for you more so. But sometimes, especially I think when you create something that's that big, it's easy to maybe get sucked into the celebrity of it. So just to keep yourself grounded, it might be best to be a little bit more reclusive when it comes to creating something that big. And from what I understand, if this is what he claims anyway, that Akira Toriyama, he said himself that both him and his family really don't read his mangas. Like, obviously he knows what the creation is, but he said he doesn't really pay too much attention to the manga, or never watch the animation or anything like that. It was just something that a job that he did and kind of put it out there, but I'm sure he was aware of the impact and the influence, but you know, he didn't get caught into the celebrity of it. There are a lot of different artists out there who get caught up in being more of the entertainment side of things, but he wasn't that. And he could have easily been that with the sheer volume of things that he's created, not just Dragon Ball, but if you think about his design work on popular RPG games like Dragon's Quest, he could have easily been a celebrity artist. But then, you know, his art might have suffered for it. You know, the concepts and the IPs might have suffered for it. When it becomes all about the artist, sometimes people forget about the work. And likewise, when it becomes all about the work, sometimes people forget about the artist and who created it. But for most artists, they're more satisfied, I think, if their work is appreciated and people love the work itself, and they don't really even have to know them, as long as they're getting some, not so much accolades, but as long as they're properly compensated for it. And I do think Akira Toriyama was one of the few artists out there who's actually properly compensated for his artwork and his conceptual work. So it's not like he was broke or anything like that. I think he actually was pretty well compensated. From what I understand, his net worth was in the millions. Now, I don't know if he could actually touch that money. I don't know if that means all of the things that he created was in that net worth. I don't know if he actually had that amount of money, but who knows? You know, because sometimes, you know, he was very private with his life, so we might not know exactly how much money he had, but I think he was pretty well compensated for the works that he created. So if nothing else, he can say that. He died fairly young. He was still in his 60s, and I think he had some sort of cerebral bleed or some sort of, you know, hematoma in his head. So, you know, I'm not exactly sure. That's only some of the reports that I saw, and some of them seem to even conflict with each other, but that is the news that I heard as to what caused his death. And it's a shame, because from what I understand, he was still working on different concepts and still putting out artwork. I know there's a game coming out that was based off of one of his creations. I think it's called Sandland. I actually have the manga in my collection because I bought it on a whim, because I just happened to see it somewhere and I just picked it up and I said, oh, this is designed by Akira Toriyama, let me take a look at this. So everything that he's created is just something that catches your eye, and I want to talk a little bit about that as we go through this memorial of this anime legend. And it's the fact that his design and art style was so unique, it's easy to pick out. You know, it's very rare that a lot of artists can create a style that becomes that popular to where it can be used in different media and still have that great appeal. You know, because for me, the first thing that I saw that got my attention from Akira Toriyama wasn't even Dragon Ball, it was Dragon's Quest. Like, I remember looking in those old video game magazines from back in the day. This is before you could go online and look up new games or whatever. You actually had to look through a magazine, and I saw like some of the images from Dragon's Quest. And then later on, there was actually an animated series that came on TV here in the West called Dragon Warrior. And I think the proper name of the show was called Dragon's Quest: The Legend of the Hero Abel. So some of you might have actually seen it. I remember very much seeing it. It came on like really early in the morning before the other Saturday morning cartoons came on in my area. And I just happened to catch it one day and just sat and watched it and fell in love with it. I just loved the story. And it was one of the few animated series that I got to see that had like a continuous story. It wasn't just everything goes back to the status quo at the end of the episode. It was very episodic, and you're following this hero Abel on the quest to rescue his girlfriend from these dragon aliens. So I enjoyed that, and I enjoyed the character designs. So that was my first introduction really to Akira Toriyama and his work. Later on, I saw Dragon Ball and I realized that it was the same artist, or at least the same designer because just the way the characters looked. I saw the original Dragon Ball series where Goku was still a little boy. Now, what's interesting is I watched this on, it was on some Hispanic channel, so I actually watched the first Dragon Ball series in Spanish. It was that engrossing though, even though I don't speak Spanish. I definitely didn't speak it back then. I know a little bit more of it now, but back then when I was a child, I didn't speak Spanish, but I watched the show anyway because it was just so interesting. You know, so it's so different than the American animated series that I had been watching. And I enjoyed watching this adventure of this little boy getting into these adventures and going to find the Dragon Balls and teaming up with this young girl, this teenage girl with blue hair. So I was into it, and I really enjoyed it. So, you know, later on when I got a little bit older, like teenage years, that's when I finally discovered Dragon Ball Z. And I think that's kind of where it started coming over here a lot more. And I actually watched it in order at first. So I got to see the arrival where Raditz shows up, and then later on Vegeta and Nappa show up, and some of the movies that came out, or the OVAs that came out around that time, like The World's Strongest, or what was some of the other ones that they had, The Dead Zone. So I was very much getting a chance to see all that in order as they came out on VHS. I would go to Suncoast Video and pick up some of them, and that's, I can say this officially, that I was like the linchpin, or I was the center point that got some of my family members into Dragon Ball Z. So like my little nephew, well, he was little back then, he was a little toddler back then, but he would watch those VHS tapes with me, and that made him a Dragon Ball fan ever since. Likewise, my father got into watching it with me, and he became a Dragon Ball Z fan. So like that, stuff like that, it feels good to know that, like thinking back on those memories of spending time with your family and friends watching Dragon Ball Z. I think a lot of young males have those memories, like they were all, because I know when I was in high school and college, guys would, you know, gather around the TV and watch Dragon Ball on Cartoon Network, right, when they were showing the Americanized version of it. So there was definitely a fandom to be had, and Dragon Ball Z especially was a hood classic. You know, I can say this, like I got to see a lot of the episodes, or a lot of the series or movies or OVAs that never made it to the States. I got to see them with some of my friends from New York City, because they were buying bootlegs of it. When they would go back to New York, they would go to some of these bootleg spots, and they would get bootleg DVDs or whatever straight from Japan or China, and we would sit in the dorms and we would watch this stuff. And I got to see just how cool some of those Dragon Ball Z stories were, like the whole Cooler story and Metal Cooler. I got to see the Cell Saga before it ever aired here in the United States. So, you know, I was really enjoying seeing these different stories go along and seeing the progression of Goku and all of his friends. So you can't really state just how big Dragon Ball and Dragon Ball Z was to pop culture. Once again, like I said, there are people from all over the world who know these characters and these stories, and lots of young males who have even patterned their lives after, you know, these characters that they watched in Dragon Ball Z. So you can't minimize it at all. Even, like I said, if you know nothing about these characters or nothing about Akira Toriyama, you know about Dragon Ball somehow. Even my wife knows about Dragon Ball, because she said when she was in college, all the males would disappear around a certain time so they can go back to their dorm room and watch Dragon Ball Z. So that's how big of an effect it had on pop culture. And I know it was really big within the black community. Like I said, it's a hood classic. No one can deny the power of Dragon Ball Z. Dragon Ball Z made it popular for black people to watch anime, basically. Like, you know, there were a few people like myself who were always into anime ever since the 80s, but when that hit, that made it popular for everybody. Once you know, it started coming on Cartoon Network and everyone started watching it, it wasn't just a nerdy thing anymore. You weren't weird for watching those Japanese cartoons anymore. That made it popular, right? So it definitely brought a change within the fandom of Japanese animation. And you know, like Akira Toriyama is probably one of the biggest ambassadors. His work is one of the biggest ambassadors for people watching Japanese animation. That's why I say, even if you weren't a Dragon Ball fan, or maybe you got into some other anime later on, like Naruto or One Piece, he had an influence on that, because he if it wasn't for Dragon Ball, you would have never heard these other great franchises. You know, those guys might not have gotten their start because Akira Toriyama created a genre, you know, the young male shonen jump genre, that other artists could jump into and emulate. So that's what I mean by his influence. Like, he didn't necessarily come up with that idea of the young boy shonen jump genre, but he popularized it to the point where it became a massive thing, and other people were able to create their own versions of that. You can't deny that Naruto or One Piece basically follows that template, right? So once again, sad news that Akira Toriyama has passed away, and his influence cannot be denied. I appreciate everything they created. I have the original Dragon Ball manga, large size, in my collection right behind me on my bookshelf. It's one of my most cherished things in my collection, in my comic book collection. I love it. I've actually read it more than once, read it twice over so far, and I just love the story. I love the artwork. I love the comedy of it. I love the fact that it's not just pure adventure. That's kind of like why I like the original Dragon Ball series more than Dragon Ball Z. I think Dragon Ball Z became a little redundant. So for me, I still enjoy Dragon Ball when Goku is a child and, you know, very ignorant and kind of like a country bumpkin. I enjoy the comedy of it and the adventure of it and the different places they go and the originality and the characters and the concepts. And it's one of those things that I just love and cherish. So to Akira Toriyama, I just wanted to say thank you for your creations, and I send out my condolences to your family, and I'm so sorry that you passed away. I know he had like a lot of things that he still wants to accomplish, but if nothing else, he created something that, like I said, reached around the globe and is part of the memories of so many people around the world. So you can share in the comment sections your memories of Akira Toriyama and his creations, and just, you know, let it be known what you think, and send your condolences for his passing in the comments. Anyway, folks, this is Chris Crazy House signing out. Peace.